At 0330 hours on a November morning in 1943, Fatma Seher Erden stood at the mouth of a clay brick hearth in the village of Adana, southern Turkey, and fed 9 kilograms of lamb into a cauldron wider than her arm span. Outside, the temperature had dropped to 4 degrees Celsius. 53 American airmen were asleep in the adjacent grain warehouse, wrapped in canvas tarpaulins, waiting for dawn. They had not eaten a cooked meal in 4 days. Fatma Erden was 41 years old. She had never left the province of Adana. She had never spoken a word of English. And she was about to feed an entire U.S. Army Air Force detachment, and keep feeding them for the next 15 hours straight. Turkey in 1943 occupied a position of impossible delicacy. The country had signed a treaty of friendship with Germany in June 1941, while simultaneously negotiating with the Allied powers. Officially neutral, Turkey served as a pressure point on the map of the entire Mediterranean theater. The Allies needed Turkish airspace, Turkish roads, Turkish silence. The Germans needed the same. Into this knife-edge geography, American transport and reconnaissance crews were routing emergency supply and evacuation missions, flying low and fast across the southern Anatolian corridor, trusting that local officials would look the other way when planes put down in emergency landings or fuel stops. But the detachment that arrived near Adana on November 11, 1943, had not planned to land at all. A C-47 Skytrain, call sign Baker 7, had developed a starboard engine fault over the Taurus Mountains at 0110 hours. The crew declared a precautionary emergency. 2 additional C-47s in the same formation came down with them. By the time all 3 aircraft taxied to a stop on a makeshift dirt strip used by Turkish cotton farmers, 42 American airmen and 11 support personnel had set foot on technically neutral soil, a diplomatic incident waiting to catch fire. The local Turkish garrison commander, a colonel named Mustafa Bilgin, knew exactly what he was looking at. He also knew exactly what he could not do. He could not report it. Not immediately. Not until those men were fed, rested, and back in the air. He made one phone call. Fatma Erden was not a military cook. She was not a caterer. She was the widow of a grain merchant and the mother of 3 sons, and she had been running the communal kitchen in her district for 11 years, cooking for harvests and weddings and the occasional flood relief. Colonel Bilgin trusted her the way you trust a wall that has never fallen down. She arrived at the warehouse before the Americans were fully awake, carrying 2 iron pots, a sack of dried chickpeas, and a bundle of dried chilies. She surveyed the room. 53 men, pale, cold, some of them shaking. She went back to her kitchen. What followed across the next 15 hours was, by every account that survived, an act of organized, relentless, extraordinary generosity. Fatma Erden did not cook 1 meal. She cooked 8. She worked from a hearth that burned olive wood and dried cow dung, in a building with no running water, with a single assistant, her 16-year-old neighbor, Layla, and a vocabulary of gestures, nods, and in hand signals that somehow communicated warmth across every language barrier in the room. The first course reached the men at 0520 hours. Mercimek çorbası, a thick red lentil soup, served in whatever vessels the warehouse had. Tin cups, ceramic bowls, the American men's own canteens if needed. The lentils had been soaking since before Fatma arrived, a detail that tells you everything about how she understood time. She did not rush. She planned forward. By 0800 hours came gazlame, flatbreads cooked directly on the iron griddle, stuffed with white cheese and fresh parsley that Fatma had sent Layla to gather from a neighbor's garden at dawn. The Americans had no name for what they were eating. Several of them would later try to describe it in their letters home. One navigator from Georgia, Staff Sergeant Roy Clemens, wrote to his mother, "Best breakfast I ever had, and I don't know what it was." She served them again at 10:30, again at noon, and again at 1400 hours when the centerpiece of the entire day arrived, a whole lamb, slow roasted over wood coals since 600 hours, accompanied by rice pilaf, roasted peppers, and bread she had been baking in rotation all morning. The warehouse smelled of charred fat and cumin and wood smoke. Some of the men sat on the dirt floor and ate with their hands because there were not enough implements. Nobody complained. The mechanics had been working the C-47 engines through most of the day, and Baker 7's starboard engine required a valve seal replacement, a 2-man, 6-hour job. The other 2 aircraft were refueled from a reserve supply that Colonel Bilgin's men had sourced from a Turkish army depot 30 kilometers east. The whole operation depended on nobody leaving, nobody talking, and everybody staying calm. Fatma Erden made that possible. There is a specific, underappreciated thing that food does in dangerous situations. It narrows time, so it makes the present moment the only moment. 53 men who should have been anxious, stranded on foreign soil in a country that could have handed them directly to German diplomatic pressure. Those men were, by multiple accounts, relaxed, occupied, fed. The sound of Fatma's cooking, the scrape of iron on iron, the hiss of water hitting a hot griddle, the thump of dough being worked, was the sound of a situation under control. At 18:15 hours, the final meal of the day went out, a sweet semolina pudding called irmik helvası, made with butter and pine nuts, warm and dense. The men ate it as the engine crews finished their work. Baker 7 turned over both engines at 18:47 hours. The formation was airborne by 19:30 hours, climbing northwest into a sky that had turned the color of iron. Fatma Erden watched them go from the warehouse door. She did not receive an official commendation from the United States military. She had no way to receive one. The mission she had fed did not officially exist. Colonel Bilgin submitted an internal report 3 days later, noting only that emergency aircraft maintenance had required the use of district resources and that community cooperation had been secured. The report did not mention Fatma Erden by name. She spent the remainder of the war in Adana, continuing to run the community kitchen. Her eldest son served in the Turkish army on the eastern border. He came home. Her second son worked the family land. Her third son became a school teacher. Fatma Erden died in 1971. She was 68 years old. Her granddaughter, Serpil Erden, gave an interview to a Turkish regional newspaper in 1995 after an American veteran, believed to be Roy Clemens, the navigator from Georgia, wrote a letter to the Turkish consulate in Atlanta asking whether anyone could identify the woman who had cooked for stranded American airmen near Adana in November 1943. He described the red lentil soup. He described the lamb. He said he had never stopped thinking about it. The letter reached Serpil Erden in April of that year. She confirmed what her grandmother had told her as a child. The Americans, the warehouse, the 15 hours, the 8 meals. Clemens died in 1998. Whether the two of them ever directly corresponded is not confirmed by any existing record. What is confirmed? 1 woman, 1 clay hearth, 53 strangers. Less than 15 hours of cooking kept a covert Allied operation intact when almost nothing else could have. She didn't have a rank. She didn't have a rifle. She had an iron pot and dried chickpeas, and the understanding that hungry men make poor decisions, and fed men make it home. That was enough. If this story moved you the way it moved us, hit that like button. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the margins of history. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. And thank you for keeping these memories alive.